I found a job listing for Playboy magazine. And so I went and had a connection that I developed from shooting high school football and went and interviewed. And they looked at my resume and were like, you don't want this job because it's paying $8.25 an hour. And I said, all things aside, can you just ignore some of my background, and don't tell me what it is that I want?
Hey guys, it's Donnie here, and I just want to let you know that we've recently launched a content development company, and this company helps people get social content. You know you need to put out a lot of content nowadays to get engagement out there in all your social platforms. Well, we've come up with a really cool way to help you get videos, blog posts, memes, social posters, and infographics for whatever social site you need. So check us out at successchamps.us and learn more about how you can get social content for your social media.
Support for this podcast comes from Point Blank Safety Services and Blue Family Fund. Point Blank Safety Services does safety differently. We know everyone is on a journey, and we want to make sure you get where you're going safely. Professional, trained, ready. There's really no comparison. Here's why hiring Point Blank Safety for your next project will make all the difference and save you huge amounts of stress and hassle. Point Blank Safety Services provides certified, uniformed police officers for a full suite of armed guard services. Don't leave the safety of your project to chance. If you're ready to make sure safety truly comes first for your next project, then visit us at pointblanksafety.com.
You're listening to Donnie's Success Champions, where I believe everybody is on a journey. Life is all about the stories you can tell and teach later. You're going to hear the stories of people who have overcome hardships, failures in life to find success along their journey. All right, guys, going to be a really cool episode. I'm bringing in Chris Pestel and, talking about his journey through West Point and that drive, but really it's a heavy focus on the back end about his creative outlets. And, I really enjoyed how much we talked about in this one about how sometimes you just got to say yes and figure it out and keep moving forward. Enjoy this one, guys. Hey guys, it's Donnie Boivin. It's going to be another fun episode. I'm going to bring in a new buddy of mine, Chris Pestel, and let him tell us all his stories. So let's jump right in. Chris, welcome to the show, my friend. Please tell us your story.
Hey Donnie, thanks for having me. Best place to start out, I guess, would be in present day. Maybe kind of walk backwards from there.
Sure.
My wife and I, we are business owners. We are editors of a magazine. And we're both professional photographers. We're both West Point graduates. She's currently active duty here in the DC area. And I've been out since the spring of 2008.
And what branch were you in?
I was in the Army. I was field artillery.
Army. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. So she works joint. She works with a lot of in a joint office now. So she's subject to all of the inter-service rivalries, which is great.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's where we are right now. She's obviously doing that full time. We started a business, a creative agency 2 years ago. And from there, we were in Chicago at the time. That's my hometown. From there, we moved out here. We've maintained those clients in Chicago. And so we set up an East Coast presence and have been expanding the business here in the East Coast, as well as maintaining that presence in Chicago and a couple other clients across the country.
Good on you. So how the hell did you get into the magazine creative agency business? Because that's not a natural turn of events for people.
Yeah, it's one of those arenas you find yourself in, and everybody has some, go from point A to B to C, back to B, skip all the way to F or G, and then back to C again.
Right.
Type of path. And I think it's no different in this case. How we arrived at a creative agency and more specifically a magazine is that it kind of became a nice holding ground for all of the skills and communities and the various job descriptions that we've had in the past. And it's kind of a great place to kind of take all those different things, put them under one roof, and then spit something out twice a year that speaks to a community that we've built up over the course of, the last decade or so, or, decade and a half of being in, a West Point community, being in a community of the Army, being in a community of creatives, being in a community in Chicago, and out here in DC, across the country. And it becomes a great way to kind of put all those things under one umbrella and create a product that people are interested in. We just published our second volume last month. And so we're looking to publish the third volume here in the winter of 2019.
Now, just so I wrap my head around it, I've heard that thrown around. When you say volume, does that mean that's a particular issue? So that's like volume 2, volume 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we decided when we started to kind of close end it at 10 volumes. It's more of a creative constraint more than anything. And just to take that very big picture thing of creating a magazine and trying to boil it down into something a little bit more manageable, turn it into pieces, and then attack each piece as opposed to this open-ended thing. The idea being that after 10 volumes, something better will come along, or somebody will be begging us to create volume 11, and that's what we're excited. We're excited about that opportunity, because one other thing about creating a magazine is that it's community-based. And so what we're really looking for is flexibility in that this specific project, this 10-volume magazine, could turn into 5 or 6 other things. It could turn into a podcast. It could turn into maybe an annual or semi-annual events across the country. It could turn into photography meetups here in the DC area. It could turn into a whole other project, or it could turn into a coffee table book. And so we really like that idea of kind of railing it, or, kind of putting those creative constraints on there and then see what happens.
No, that's awesome. I mean, so why start it in the first place? I mean, is it just a passion project or something you're like, I've got to give back to the world? Why create it?
I think there's multiple answers to that. One, again, like was talked about before, with the bigger picture of something like a publication, is putting creative constraints on what you do. And so to be able to put creative constraints on creativity itself, say, here is a finite thing that comes out twice a year. So it's 100 pages. And so unlike a Instagram feed, which is endless, unlike a Facebook feed, which is endless, here is this finite product that you can look at and experience, touch, feel. And it's a way to experience, for instance, the West Point community in a way that you're not getting right now. We do have a Associate of Graduates that has a quarterly magazine, and this isn't meant to compete with that. This is something different. It's something that they have a certain mission with their magazine, and we have a different mission with our magazine. And so we're actually getting ready to send a small batch of those to them so that they can give them to major donors of West Point, because they don't see it as competition, just like we don't see what they're doing as competition. It's all pulling on the same end of the rope. So there's definitely a communal aspect to why we did it. There's also just the idea of seizing an opportunity, also leveraging that community that we've already invested in, instead of going out and creating a magazine for any number of different things that we're interested in, be it sports or food, or, a lot of those things already exist. There's not a whole lot of, there's not a lot of print publications routinely coming out about the United States Military Academy.
Here's another interesting thing that keeps running through my head hearing you talk is, why a magazine? I mean, and what I mean by that, in this day and age, you got digital everything. Why come out with a printed, just because I used to be in commercial printing, I'm going to ask, is it a saddle stitch magazine, or is it a hard bound?
It's perfect bound. And
why come in that direction in the day and age of the digital space?
Yeah. Well, I think it's twofold. I like books. I think that's probably number one. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And I think that, again, to go back to what I said a little bit earlier about like social media, it's a great way to experience. I love it. I don't this is no way meant to be like, well, you can't do that and you got to do this. It's not binary. I think they both complement each other. And so nobody's doing that. Nobody is putting out a current artifact, kind of taking note or taking photographs, writing columns or opinion pieces on the current state of things. And so we figured, why not us? Because that's what we would want. We want to buy that. And so we said, instead of wanting it, let's go create it. And that was a lot of what was behind creating a print piece.
You know, what's brilliant about that is most people go into business to make money. I really enjoy the fact that you guys went into business because it was something you wanted. It's not a surefire way to success, but a damn sure, you know, helps you carve a trail when you get stacked up against it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's tough because you have to figure out a way to keep things sustainable at first and then profitable. And
right.
So that's basically going from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 2. And then, you know, what you decide to do from there is up to you. But we have tried our best to figure out a way to take it from an idea and a passion project into something that is worth the time and the effort, and then move that to a point to where we can spend time on it and feel good about it and not be looking at it, you know, as an expense on our bottom line. Because again, this magazine is one of the pillars of our creative agency. Like we basically, it's our magazine, but it's one of our clients.
Right.
And so, you know, we have other clients too that we're working with, you know, and so this is just one of those pieces. But again, ultimately, you know, it has the potential to grow, because that community, again, we're offering something to a community that isn't getting a particular thing.
No, I love it. What people don't understand is when you can niche down like that and really get into a very segmented unit, you can grow a fantastic business because you can deliver a very specific message to them that they're looking to hear. But, you know, I'm really curious because I know you started your own company and started this whole magazine, and it's been all sunshines and rainbows and you got cash falling out of the sky. Walk us through that journey of some of the bumps and bruises you've gotten along the way of getting this whole thing up and running.
Yeah, so we published the first volume in late January of 2018. Volume 2 was published in September of 2018. But that was not like we didn't, you know, in December of 2017 decide, let's put out a magazine. And then a month later there was a magazine.
Right.
Again, that would be, you know, it would be impressive if somebody could do that, but that's not the way that it went. And so that first volume was all of our own work. And so that was over the accumulation of about 10 years worth of spending time photographing various West Point things. And so this was a way to kind of take those things and put them into a thing and put it out in the world and say, this is what we're doing. So by the time volume 2 came around, we actually were able to collaborate with 15 other West Point grads, so that, you know, it was getting further and further away from, this is what we've done and this is what other people are doing. And that's, right. Again, that's been like the hallmark of it, is let's tap into the other creatives that are West Point grads, which is something that people usually don't equate with a military academy. And we both had creative ambitions. My wife and I had creative ambitions before we went to West Point. They survived not only West Point, but then 5 years in the Army. And because of that, we're like, that means something. We don't know necessarily what it means, but it means something. There's probably other people out there who are willing, who are either the creativity also survived that, or are possibly considering giving it up. And so we're like, let's have a conversation around this idea and see what it means, like see what West Pointers create and why, and what does it mean in terms of like the underlying mission of the military academy, which is leadership. And so how does creativity and leadership, how do they interact with each other? And then use those people, you know, collaborate with those people to tell the West Point story from a graduate perspective about graduates. And that's one thing the Association of Graduates doesn't really do, and it's by design, is tell the story of graduates. They have ways to kind of get some of that information, but they don't have the manpower or resources to start knocking down the doors of the 56,000 graduates to say, let's start telling your story. And we're not limited by that constraint. We can go tell the stories that we want to tell. And as we start to knock on doors, we start to, get more and more stories. And it's very encouraging because we, come across other creatives that we didn't know about. And that's exciting because we feel other people would want to know about that.
Well, here's what I love about this is, oftentimes I'm telling people, go figure out whatever your thing you geek out about and dive into that world. I mean, for you guys, it was the creative side of things. For some people, it may be fly fishing, who knows, but go dive into that world because you're going to start finding your people. And what I mean by your people is other people from walks of life that are into the same crazy thing you're into. So you guys did it twice because you took the West Point grads, which all have that commonality. And then you niched it down and said, okay, I'm into creatives. I bet there's other people that would geek out on the same type of stuff that we do. Let's do something. I mean, and that's huge. A lot of people start businesses out because of emotion, right? Some sort of feeling. And those emotional based companies don't typically last very long because there's no structure behind it. I love that you were able to put together a team with similar bonds and are trying to figure out, how to do something with it. But in the same task, when working with a bunch of military people or West Point type grads, you tend to get a lot of leaders and not a lot of followers. Has that been your guys' experience as you guys continue to grow with this thing?
So I think to go back to some of the pitfalls along the way, when I first got out in 2008, I immediately went to, the ability of the internet was not what it is today. YouTube hadn't hit a stride. I believe LinkedIn was the most powerful source of trying to track down other graduates, which, that makes sense for that time. And that's what I went to. And I think I found one other West Point grad, in its 200-year history that was a photographer. And that was hard. And I was like, okay, I guess that's it. I guess I'm the number.
It's over.
I was like, I guess I'm number 2, And so, depending on who you are, you could see this as a good thing or a bad thing. But one of the things that you get fed while at West Point is with West Point on your diploma, you can do anything you want. And again, from an outsider's perspective or someone who is, someone in the Army that has different views on West Pointers might look at that and kind of roll their eyes. But ultimately it boils down to confidence, is that by coming here, you're going to leave with a lot of confidence. And so upon leaving the service, I was like, well, I'm going to put that to the test. So if they are telling me I can do whatever I want, I'm going to go figure out how to be a photographer. And so I started to do that. And I was like, well, let me look and see if there's anybody else that's run that path so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. And it was one other guy. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to kind of reinvent the wheel. and so started to go down that path and started to, I left the military as a 03 as a captain, and was making with the housing allowance that I had at the time, was making about $75,000, which was good for a 27, 28-year-old. And for the most part, anybody who leaves the service usually takes a job that is they're usually gunning for 6 figures. That's the general
in the officer ranks.
In the officer rank. That's usually that's the motivation. That's the way. That's in your circles. That's what people are talking about. And they're like, how do I quickly get to six figures? And my path was just slightly different in that I went to work for a sports portrait company the day after I signed out and made $19,000.
God, all right, pause. I freaking love this because I ended up talking to a ton of officers that are coming out or high level enlisted guys that are making survivable income. So I'm not talking about your E4s and E1s and below, those type of guys, even your E5s, maybe E6s and below. I'm talking about you guys hit E7s, E8s, 9s, and then get your officer ranks. Their biggest problem when they hit civilian world is they want to make a lateral move, right? They want to make a lateral move. And I tell every single one of them, to stop trying to make a lateral move. And their thing is, well, my lifestyle's built this way. It's created this way. And I'm like, no, it's not. You've been moved around every 4 years, your entire thing. You know how to pack all your crap up and make a move, downsize, do all that. And to my point is, if you were able to climb the ranks in the military, go get any job you can freaking get and climb the ranks again. Right? You'll just be able to do it faster than your counterparts because you already know how to do it. You know, quit trying to go swing for the fences, go get something and climb. I have nothing but respect for you, knowing that as an 03, you came out and got a job for $19,000. Freaking kudos. Well done, dude.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun. And it was to the point of, you know, people say that you can't put a price on happiness. And I was like, it's somewhere around $50,000.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
You know, so because one of the toughest parts about the whole transition was that if you want to be a photographer, you can do that in the Army, but not as an officer. You couldn't. You would have to resign your commission. It would be a big thing. You know, the taxpayers wasted money on an officer at the military academy, so on and so forth. You know, it would be it's this big thing. And
you'd have to be almost be a combat photographer. Isn't that true?
More or less. Yeah. I mean, there's other ways to kind of go that route, which I didn't explore. I was ready for a clean break also, so that wasn't really. Oh, you mean almost everybody else that goes through the military? All right, I'm done.
Yeah, right, let's get out. Right. So
it was like okay, that's great and all, but I'm going to go try to figure this out in the civilian world. And you know, because I remember the first couple of people that tried to keep me in were like, well, you can go work for PAO and so on and so forth. And I was like, but I don't want to man the public affairs office.
Oh, okay.
And they're like, so, you know, you can, you know, go work for that. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'll be managing photographers. I won't be shooting. I won't be, you know, a photographer per se. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And, you know, also as combat arms, if you try to do anything that's not that, people make it very tough, as in it's if you're going to do that, it's going to be a career killer.
It is.
That's what their definition of a career killer is. It's not the same for everybody. And it's hard in that macho world to buck that trend.
So to that point, I mean, I can imagine sitting, you know, in your barracks or wherever you were staying, telling people you want to be a photographer in a military setting. I'm sure that wasn't the thing that people went, oh, that's awesome, you know, on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, I will say for the most part, it wasn't until getting out, until I had put my packet in to get out. And then 6 months before getting out that I was like, I'm going to go be a photographer. This wasn't something that I grew up wanting to do. Right. This, again, it goes back to that whole idea of that saying of, you know, you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, let's give that a shot. And, you know, I was actually, in the time that I was finishing up, I was working at basically a desk job, and was as close to 9 to 5 as you can get in the Army. And it was kind of boring. And I was a single dad, and I was finishing up, and I had kind of a boring day to day, didn't have much of a social life, you know, was raising my daughter. She was maybe 2.5, 3 years old at this time, and was like, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get a job at a small music venue in town, and I'm going to work the door. I'll have a built-in social life. I'll have built-in free drinks. And when I do go out, I won't be paying somebody. I'll be getting paid, as opposed to paying someone to watch my child and then paying for drinks. So I was like, this is a pretty good idea here. It might be a nice way for me to kind of piggyback a couple things on top of each other. And that's where I actually started photographing, was as I was working the door and the door slowed, I would start bringing a camera and I would photograph the bands that were playing in this smaller music venue. And so, you know, I ended up going and finding a local freelance photographer, and I showed her my portfolio, which was, if I were to look at it today, it's, you know, kind of terrible. But I showed it to her, and she was like, you know, whether she was telling the truth or was just trying to give me a jump start, she said, "You're good." She goes, "This is what you should be doing. You shoot with a graphic eye. This is what you should be doing." And I was like, okay, absolutely, fantastic. And like when the next day went out and like bought my first camera, and then just started figuring out like, okay, how do I become a photographer when I get out of the Army? And that led to, finding a entry-level job with a sports portrait company, making $19,000 a year.
That's just awesome. And as a sports photographer, were you going out to like events in photography, or was it like sports headshots?
Yeah, this was the sports headshots.
Okay.
So it was not super exciting in that regard.
Right. So what I was going to say is, in your head, you got this whole thing of, I'm going to be a photographer. Now you're stuck in a studio aimed at some dude's or some girl's head and taking shots all day.
So the one thing that was nice is that it was on location. So you would go to a different corner. So I was in South Carolina. So I went to a different corner of South Carolina every day. So one day I'd be in Myrtle Beach, next day I'd be in Hilton Head, then I'd be up in, Gaffney or, Spartanburg or, all these different places. Every day it was somewhere different. And so there was a social aspect to it that was pretty interesting. There was a problem solving aspect that was very interesting. There was autonomy. And these were the things that started to make sense as to what I wanted to do. Is that I really enjoyed the fact that I was autonomous on a daily basis. I liked the fact that I could go in, shake hands with people, say, hey, I'm going to take care of you today, and then make that happen, and then be in and out in as efficient a way as possible while making good photos, but also, assessing the situation. What's the background? Is there a highway back over there? Is there a parking lot? What's the best place in this gym to take a photo? And doing all those different things on a daily basis and getting good and working with lights and multiple light scenarios. And, so there was a lot of learning on the job. And that was the thing that I learned. I was like, well, I could go back to school and learn photography, or I can get somebody to pay me to learn how to do it. And so that was actually a lesson learned from the whole working as a door guy at a bar. Was instead of, trying to pay to have a social life, why don't I pay somebody else to get me to have a social life? And same thing with working as a photographer. How do I get someone else to pay me to learn? And so that's what was really great about that job. Now that job only lasted about 1 year, and I was let go because of creative differences, because just like you said, there was this idea of what being a photographer was, and then there was the reality of what this job was, where there was a certain point where I had basically learned as much as I could learn, and then it was about making better photographs. And in a way, I understand this from a business standpoint now, and at the time I didn't, was that I was like, I want to make the best photographs possible. And, as a small business that I was working for, they were like, we can't teach everybody how to take the photos you're taking. And not that they were mind blowing, but they were just different. And they're like, we have to have a standard. And I'm like, well, I'm tired of that. I want to be different. And he was like, why don't you go out on your own? And I was like, okay. And so I ended up moving back to Chicago, back home, and started my freelance career from there. And
here's what's cool about this, and I want people to hear this. And Mark Cuban, in one of his books, Mark Cuban's the owner of the Mavericks, one of the Sharks, right? He talks about how he learned everything in life, and he very specifically talks about if he didn't know his skill set, he went and got a job to learn that skill set. So like he didn't know computers, so he went and got a computer job. He didn't know sales, so he went and got a sales job. Sounds like you kind of took that same MO versus instead of going to school and learning how to do X, let me go get a job and I'll learn on the go, which in my opinion is the best way to learn anyways, because you're learning real tactics, real things that are tangible assets that you can carry with you forward versus just learning something through a book. And I really wish more people would embrace that philosophy, especially, veterans or anybody who's in some sort of transitional phase in their life is, it's not necessarily about going to find your passion job. It's about going to find something that you can go learn something, and maybe it'll become a passion, which is kind of what sounded like it happened to you.
Yeah, I will say I went back to school for a short time. I took 2 semesters at a community college. So I was 12 years of Catholic grade school and high school, and then I went to West Point and then was in the Army. And then my next schooling after that was at a community college. It was the first time I actually went to school not in a uniform. And so I was like, okay, like what's this all about? But it was meant as a precursor to possibly go back to school for a graduate degree. And I did 2 semesters, and I really, really enjoyed it. But it was tough, especially the community college setting, because you have such a wide variance of students. You have, brand new high school graduates that are, brand new, college students there. And then you have senior citizens who are doing lifelong learning skills all in the same class. And so it's very, very weird dynamic in that regard. And so I did about 2 semesters, and I was like, okay, Like, let's go give the graduate school thing a try. And I just, I got to the point of trying it and just, it wasn't the right fit. And I was like, why am I sitting in a classroom paying somebody when I could be out doing it? And that's actually what happened was I took a internship after the second semester, and I took the second semester. I knew I wasn't going to do school anymore, but I took an internship in a newspaper and started, working for about 3-4 weeks. So I actually wasn't doing an internship. I was volunteering because there was no pay. There was no school going on.
Right.
And simultaneously, I came across I found a job listing for Playboy magazine, which is the headquarters at that time was in Chicago. And so I went and had a connection that I developed from shooting high school football, and went and interviewed. And they looked at my resume and were like, you don't want this job because it's paying $8.25 an hour. And I said, all things aside, can you just ignore some of my background, and don't tell me what it is that I want? And
good on you.
And so I did. Not only I worked one job that was making $19,000 a year, but then I took another job, which was part-time, making $8.25, and went to work there 4 days a week, was a low-level photo editor. Within 2 weeks, I had acquired more additional, responsibilities. I started as an image technician. And fortunately for me, but unfortunately for the company, they started to downsize because they were getting ready to slowly but surely move the headquarters out of Chicago and out to LA. And in that, we lost one of our designers. But for me, because I had already shown the capacity to take on more responsibilities, they said, would you be interested in the newly vacant page designer position? And I said, absolutely. And so I was able to, while people were getting let go, I actually got a raise. And then got another raise about 8 months later. So in the 2 years that I was there, while people were getting let go, I was able to slowly but surely work myself up the rung. And again, somebody else paying me to learn. And I knew how to do those things at a basic level.
Yeah. And again, be willing to take a job that's not going to pay the best, knowing, Grant, yours can be, and this one could be argued as a little circumstantial, but nobody gets lucky without putting themselves into a situation to get lucky, right? So by putting your head down and getting to work, figuring things out, and that willingness to say yes and keep moving forward, you're learning a new skill set. Somebody else is paying for it, and you can never give those skills back. It's like riding a bike. Once you figured it out, you can always get better at riding a bike, but you're not.
Well, it's funny. It's funny that you use that analogy there, because, I use the whole idea of being lucky, and, I've photographed enough and been around enough people where somebody will say, oh, that was how lucky that you got that photograph. and sure, like chance, the way that the phrase goes, chance favors the prepared mind.
Yep.
And, as far as whether it's a career progression or it's an instance of photographing, if you've done your homework and you're prepared, you're going to be luckier, let's say. Yep. And it's time and time again, people that are aware and paying attention are the ones that put their head down and, don't have to think about their exposure, settings when they're looking at their camera, looking at the back of it, and there's another photo happening. The photographer who's lucky gets it because they are prepared. And so it's the same thing from a career standpoint, like just being opportunistic, and seeing hey, I might not be able to make a living off of $8.25 an hour or $19,000. I might be able to do that for more than a year. But if I put my head down and attack it the same way I attacked any number of other things in my life, then I should come out on the other side successful.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. And I really hope more people hear that message, because there's a lot of people that are sitting there in their head right now thinking, what's my next life move? What am I going to do? And I've got all this stuff I've accumulated, and I would encourage you, if you're younger, freaking do it now. Get the experience when you're young, because it does get harder and harder the older you get. Once you really start attaining houses and cars and, stuff, it makes it harder to do those type of transitions unless you're as crazy as I was and just said to hell with it all and started my own company and walked away from everything. But, it's that progression. Go learn something. Go try something you've never done before, because you never know what the hell is going to come from it. And people were like, well, what if I hate it? I said, well, then you learned you hated it. So go try, go experience. That's so awesome. So after leaving Playboy, where'd you go from there?
So actually, my next job there was at my Catholic high school.
Wait, I want to know how that conversation went when you're going back to your Catholic high school, more prim and proper suits, and your last job's Playboy, and they take one look at your resume. Was it immediately absolutely you're getting the job, or was there some hemming and hawing?
So fortunately, that there was like almost no issue, because I had been photographing at the school since. So I left Playboy in the spring of 2012. I had been photographing when I moved back home. I started photographing the football team, and so I've been photographing there for about 3 years already at that point. And so they knew me before I started working there. I went to school there. I played football there, so I had a very good rapport with a lot of the administration. And so I got to the point to where I left Playboy, and I am not kidding. I left there and thought I was going to be able to piggyback this magazine experience and go work at either another magazine or get a job with a creative agency of some sort. And it just was not happening, because Chicago is not really a hotbed for that kind of thing. There was a reason that Playboy was leaving Chicago to go somewhere else. Like, it's just, it's not to say that those things don't exist in Chicago. They absolutely do. But it's not a hotbed like New York or LA might be.
Right.
And I was running into that problem of being like, well, I'm either going to have to relocate, or, to go take basically another entry-level job at another magazine or something like that. It just wasn't working. It was very, very frustrating, banging my head of sending, resume after resume into the internet void. And I was just like, I was seriously had a conversation with a West Point grad on like a Monday over lunch. And I was like, I honestly feel like I would be better off standing on a corner with a sign that said, well, like, here's my resume, come hire me. I was like, I feel like I'd have better success doing that. The next day I was standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus to come get my daughter in the morning. And literally the high school football coach pulled up into one of the driveways. He goes, Chris, come over here. He goes, we've got this job opening at the school. Would you be interested in it? And I was like, absolutely.
You should have stayed on the bus corner, right?
yeah, I should have been out there. I was out there every day. So I guess it just finally paid off, because he saw me standing there every day as he drove by. And so I went and explored that. They had already, known my background. And so it was the other guy that introduced me to the job at Playboy was another graduate of the school also. So it actually was, it was as non-weird as it possibly could be, I guess.
Well, and just really quick for the people that are looking for jobs, the key takeaways in this is putting your resumes on the internet of any sort and hoping that somebody's going to call you on that is not the way to find a job. Go network your butt off. Go get in conversations with people and tell people what you're looking for, what you're trying to do. Don't throw it into, I love your phrase, the internet void. Go network, go rub elbows.
Well, and that's one thing that I think I could impart, in a having a pulpit like this, of saying something to the effect of, like, even if it means, if you're backed into a corner, like, go take a job that pays minimal, but puts you in front of some of those people that might make a difference. So, like, I went and photographed high school football. It was nothing but a personal project. But not only did I get the job at Playboy because of it, not because of it, but it may allowed me to be lucky enough to get that job, because I met somebody who also was photographing high school football, and we started to talk, and he looked at the book that I ended up putting together. And then that job came open, and I reached out to him, and then I had a job at a major magazine, having never gone to school for it.
Well, there's also that mental shift too, is when you have a job, you don't have such an act of desperation in finding a job. So it's a mental shift that'll happen just because you do have some sort of income coming in through the door. Maybe not enough income, but you come across as desperate. So
right. But then also with the high school, that job came about. That was a full-time job. That was a full-time salary position with benefits and everything. And that job came about because I was out shooting something I loved. And so I started to realize that, like, if I can put myself out there, now granted, I have this skill that allows me to go, it's a passport into other people's worlds. So one day I could be photographing a Japanese seaweed snack. And then the next day we could be out photographing the Chicago Blackhawks. And then the next day you could be out photographing an event for, a mommy bloggers event. And so it gives me this passport into a lot of different worlds, and you never know who you're going to, who's going to respond to you. And, and that's a thing I don't take lightly, is that I've found a skill that allows me to navigate lots of other worlds that you might find a footing in or interact with somebody that could offer another opportunity. And that's one of the takeaways that I try to impart on people, is that, like, go find something that allows you to present your best self to people. And then you don't know what might happen. You don't know what chance opportunity might occur, but you also have to be willing to either take a step back, what looks like a step back, and adjust your lifestyle, adjust your spending habits. You can't say, I want to do this, but I want to maintain this lavish lifestyle that I've, developed. You have to be willing to, if you want to, like, for instance, if you want to do something creative, you sometimes have to adopt an artist's lifestyle of minimal this or minimal that, or start to rearrange what your priorities are. It just doesn't apply to something in a creative field. It could be any field. Like, you have to adjust your lifestyle accordingly. Like, you can't live a $75,000 lifestyle on a $19,000 income. So that's
that's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well done. What a cool story to jump on a ride with you. Where do you think all this is going to take you, man? I mean, you've been doing a lot of cool things. You've got cool experiences. You've been able to climb, figure it out, find yourself in great spots, and get, air quotes, lucky. Where's this all going to take you?
I don't know. And I like that. I think that mentality is not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's why with the current magazine, that's why I like the idea that it could turn into something else. Even when I first picked up a camera, that was the guiding principle, is that this could turn into something else. And so when I had that opportunity to work at a magazine, I got to experience that somebody else's creative process starts when a photographer's creative process ends, the page designer's or the photo editor's creative process starts. And I really liked that. And I was like, oh, this has opened up the world to so many other things now. And so photography got me in the door to working the production side of a magazine. And then having a magazine opens you up to community. And you start to see, like, okay, well, how else can you either affect that community, participate in that community? What other products or services can you offer that community? And starts to, build upon itself. And, that idea of shooting for something more, there's certain people who will be photographers for their entire career. There's other people that will transition out of being a photographer and become something else. And it's not to say that one way or the other is better, worse, preferred. Each person can pick their path. But for me and my wife, we've developed this thing that allows us to get the foot in the door in a community and to provide something with a perspective and to have it be consumed twice a year with that cumulative nature of building that brand over the course of what will be about 5 years. And, we do have a goal. We do have a goal of opening up some sort of storefront/studio. Like, that's kind of where this is all kind of gearing. That's the beast that we're feeding, of like, how do we create a thing that's going to help us gain, that kind of presence and that sort of brand recognition, to where we could open up something and people would know who the people behind it are, and that would want to come there and either experience whatever type of storefront we would have, whether it's a curated offering of West Point memorabilia or products, or it's something else entirely, or it's, a photo studio that's geared towards the West Point community, or it's, again, something else entirely. We don't know, but we're setting ourselves and building a skill set constantly that is giving us the best possible way to be reactive in the future. And
I love it, man. I mean, that flexibility, like you said, is not for everybody, but if you can live in that lifestyle, what a cool way to live. I mean, it's the ability to say yes at any moment just to see where it takes you.
Absolutely. That's something that we've found a lot of satisfaction in. And again, like I said, that opportunistic lifestyle is not for everybody, and it's not meant to try to push that on anyone. It's, but for people out there that want to take that leap, I think they're more ready for it than they think they are. It sometimes takes a conversation or hearing a podcast or reading a book or whatever to kind of be like, you know what, let me go ahead and take that chance.
That's awesome. Well, man, we're going to start wrapping up the show from there, man. It's been really cool having you on. Here's how I like finishing out every show, and I do stump some people on this, so we get ready. If you were going to leave my audience with a quote, a phrase, a saying, maybe a mantra, something they can take with them on their journey, especially something that when they're stacked up against it and they're faced with choices, trying to figure out what to do, what would be that quote or phrase you would say, hey, when you're going through it, remember this?
There's one that I don't know if it necessarily fits this, because you have to find this first before you can enact it. But I found almost like a great reset button when you can change a have to a get to. So for instance, as a photographer, you have good days, you have bad days. And some days you are really excited about shooting something, and sometimes you're going to shoot that same thing and you're like, I have to go shoot this. And then it's like, wait, hit the reset button. I get to do this. I get to be a photographer. I get to take that camera as a passport and interject myself into other people's lives. And I get to ask them questions about what they do and how they do it, as opposed to have to. Once you start talking in the have tos, I think you need to do some assessment and say, do I need to just change my have tos into get tos? Or have I gotten so far into a have to that I need to make a change? And I think that can be a nice little mechanism for self-assessment wherever you happen to be in life. And with that comes the idea of just trying to remember why you started something in the first place, and kind of going back and saying like, hey, when I first started this, whatever it happened to be, it could be a job at it's in corporate America, it could be starting your own business, is just to go back and remind yourself, why did I start this? What was the reason? And just revisit that statement, or if you haven't written it down, write it down so that you can go back and revisit it when times are tough or times are hard.
That's awesome. And I think you guys should make sure you include that somewhere in your marketing collateral. I think it would do wonders for you guys' stuff. Man, Chris, thanks so much, brother, for coming on the show and doing this. I've really enjoyed having you on here and sharing your stories with everybody. How do people find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Probably the best way would be through email, or just go on our website, Cadets the Magazine. That's probably the best way right now. That's the one we're most active with. It's cadetx@cadetissue.com. That's probably the best way. There's contact forms and lots of information on how to get in touch with us there.
Awesome. Well, brother, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great.
Thanks for listening to Donnie Success Champions podcast. If you'd like to hear more about our current guest today, or if you'd like to hear stories from our other guests on the show, come hang out with us on our website at successchampspodcast.com. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you need to reach out to me for any reason, you can catch me at Donnie@DonnieBoivin.com.